What I'm going to do right now is a little demo talking about process of retopologizing using RetopoFlow in Blender. I'm right now in 2.8 whatever, 2.82 something. RetopoFlow, if you don't know, it's this wonderful add-on. There was a version for 2.79 Blender that is in the process of being updated still to 2.8 plus. It's really the best retopology tools I've seen for Blender, and in some cases there's some parts to it that are better than any retopology tools I've seen anywhere. I have a lot of experience with retopology, in particular in Maya, using Quad Draw, which I still think is great. It's very fast, it's really stable, it's really responsive. It has some great features. The best part of that, in case you want to check that out, is that it really doesn't require a lot of switching. In fact, it's sort of designed to have all the retopology done with a single tool, and then you just need to use the right hotkeys to sort of swap between functionality. So in that regard, outside of its just general responsiveness, Quad Draw just has a really nice workflow in that regard. Now, RetopoFlow in Blender is a little different. It is a bunch of different tools, and you do need to change between those tools if you want to get the full functionality out of it. That being said, some of those tools, as I said, are superior to Maya and I think other programs. Contours being a particularly notable strength, which is one of the tools in RetopoFlow that I'm going to show you. Now, I'm not sure I'll be able to do or I plan to do the entire head in this sitting, but you'll start to get a sense of how I would retopo this head. And the other things to note about RetopoFlow, I think I mentioned, it's still under development. I hope and expect that it's going to improve in terms of, say, responsiveness, which I believe it is. I follow the fellow who is developing it on Twitter. I'm sorry if I forget his name, but I can certainly try to post that down in the comments, a link. And he talks about some improvements to responsiveness, but you're going to see as I start going through this video that even just booting up RetopoFlow takes some time. Now this mesh, I don't know how many polygons it is. Let's see what happens if I go back to object mode. Let me just select that. Seems like this has somewhere north of 400,000 faces. So this was just done in Retopo. Obviously I don't need, in this case, the entire body. I'm just going to be doing the head. So let's dive into it. I've got the object selected. I've already got RetopoFlow loaded in. I'm going to leave that to you to figure out the steps to installing and activating an add-on. Lots of documentation on that online. You'll notice once it's set up, there's this button right here at the top of object mode called RetopoFlow, and when I click on this drop down, when I'm starting a new RetopoFlow, you can see there's RF, create new target. So the idea being that this body will be my target to doing the retopology. Let's start with that. Now this is the first thing you can see is that, again, when I compare this to Maya, this is more or less instantaneous in Maya, but it took a few moments over here in RetopoFlow. Next thing, you can see it launches a whole custom sort of interface, and I mentioned that RetopoFlow is really just a bunch of different tools that speed up the retopo process. There are also some settings or options over on the right here. You'll notice I do have a symmetrical character right here, so I'm going to go right over here to Symmetry None and make sure to enable X Symmetry. I know it's been activated because you can see this line that suggests or indicates what the line of symmetry is. Okay. Now, all kinds of stuff has been sort of set up under the hood, or basically this new mesh already has a mirror modifier applied. I think it's also got a displacement modifier that allows the new mesh to sort of sit outside. the or on top of the high-res mesh underneath. So when you're dealing with retopology, and again, you can probably find lots of retopology process or theory kinds of videos out there. I may talk a little bit about that while I'm starting to work, but one great way to think about retopologizing something like this head is to establish key face loops. Once you've got those key face loops established, then you can start to fill in the gaps, kind of connect those face loops. But the idea is to establish those key parts to the flow of a more complex organic form like this one. You'll again find you can find lots of reference to this, just images on Google Images, where you can look at face topology just to get a sense. Typically you have, there's a great image somewhere out there that talks about the 5 main face loops. You've got the eye loops, the mouth loops, the nose to chin loop, the raccoon mask, and I think the other one on that I'm thinking of is maybe the jawline, or head and jawline face loop. So those are all key face loops that I'm going to plan on establishing here. Once I do that, I may start filling in a little bit, but that'll probably be it, just to give you a sense of how the program works and how to sort of start with establishing the key flow. The typical way that you might want to start, at least the way that I think RetopoFlow is meant to be used, is using one of these first two. I think the order is here for a reason, the order of these tools, where you're using either contours or polystrips to really establish those initial kind of the initial flow, the initial face loops. I'm actually going to try out polystrips to begin with. Now, polystrips, the way this works is, and I am getting this message with the clip brush, but I'm just going to close that up. The way this works is it is partly dependent, or it is dependent on the size of your brush, and this just borrows from Blender's hotkeys. If I press F and then drag left to right, that increases or decreases this brush size, and you'll notice when I change this and start using this tool, it's going to dictate how big my polygons are. Pretty much all of these tools are dependent on the Control hotkey to enable the use of them. So if I hold down Control, left click and drag, you'll see it just creates this little stroke on my surface, and when I let go, you can see it creates a little strip of polygons. Now, one great thing, or there are many great things about this, is it's all a preview. So you can start to reposition the beginning and end of these two. You can rotate them a bit. You can see it's pretty sensitive, so be careful. What's also great at this stage is that you can increase or decrease the number of polygons. I can use the plus key or the minus key right on my keyboard to sort of increase or decrease that number. Okay? So this is, again, a great way to start to establish those key face loops. Now, I don't like this one to begin with. I'm going to be creating a sort of a rounder strip. I like to start with the eyes personally, and then move on to some of those other key face loops. So I'm going to actually need, especially since I have some tight forms over here where the eye is close to the nose and the mouth and so on, I'm going to need pretty small face loops to kind of get things sort of fit inside, in particular, this sort of area. So I'm going to undo a few steps and get back to here. Now, let's get in a little closer. I'm going to F and decrease my size a little bit. It might be a little too small. Now, by the way, I can always tweak stuff later on. This is sort of just an initial thing, initial shape to work with. And so, let's see, that still might be a little small. Let's try that out. So now what I'm going to do is try doing a full loop all the way around the sort of eye opening here. Hold down Control again. Just go all the way around. Now, I find typically you don't want to go quite the full distance because you can start to get some funny business over there. I'm just going to manually close this up afterwards. And that actually looks okay. I think I have probably too many polygons to start with, so I'm going to just hit minus a couple of times, and you're going to already see there's some funny stuff happening on the, basically with the the direction of this edge ring. So I'm going to just, in my experience, I'm just going to leave that alone, apply this basically, and then just tweak afterwards to reshape this. So if I hit, for instance, A right now, that's swaps between select all and deselect all in this. So that just deselected, and it also at the same time basically made the polygons. So now what I can do, for instance, is go over to, let's say, tweak. And I may get that error message again. We'll see. No. And tweak allows me to push and pull points around. And you can see what I'm doing here is I'm starting to reposition the verts, basically kind of like an old-fashioned clock. In other words, each one of these little perpendicular edges, I'm trying to get pointing more or less inwards towards the middle of the eye opening. Okay? So you can see there are all kinds of crazy angles that resulted. So I'm just going to start repositioning those. I'm also at the same time starting to push in. You can see some of the verts over here to start to match the contours. Now in addition, and this is pretty common for many retopology tool sets, when I drag, say, from one vert to another vert, and I've got two, it's going to start to, at some point, I believe it'll snap, so that basically they've merged. Okay. Now what I can do over here, I'm able, there we go, is start to pull this, and this is going to allow me to close up my loop. So now I have a one continuous, complete face loop with no breaks. Okay. So again, I'm sort of continuing to tweak this stuff. Looks like I need to sort of pull this out a little bit, get that kind of notch or corner to the eye opening, but this is getting pretty close. You can see, I don't know if you saw in the video, but there are also some funny sorts of like blips that are happening with at least my RetopoFlow at this stage. It's sort of momentary. Okay, something like that. Now that, again, it's a really tight space for this particular character, so I may want to take the trouble to really tighten up, in particular way down in here, so that I can fit some of these other face loops in this kind of cramped area. Again, depending on your character, you may not have such a sort of tight space over there. So again, you can see I'm just sort of tweaking, pushing. Now there are some other tools, and while I'm doing this video, I may also be just sort of offering a little commentary on things I wish I could see in RetopoFlow. And again, I'm typically referring to things I like out of Quadra and Maya. So you'll notice I've been working with this tweak tool for a while, and I really would prefer that this not be a separate tool that I have to switch to. I would love to be in any other tool and just at some point have the ability to just tweak with a hotkey rather than, again, having to switch over, because I am a tweaker, and I think a lot of people are who do this kind of work. They just want to be able to really quickly change those the position of your verts. Okay. Now you'll find I'm going to actually use a fair bit of this poly pen soon, and there is a sort of tweaking that's built right into that, but it seems like it's not available in some of the other tools. And again, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. Please feel free to leave a comment. Okay, so I've established that full face loop. Great. Let's go back again to poly strips and establish maybe one or two other key face loops. Now I talked about the the mouth loop. Now I've got this character, you can see it's got a closed mouth, so it's a little bit funky, but we'll just try it out. So in this case, I don't have to worry about a full loop because I've got the symmetry. So in other words, I'm going to start somewhere around the middle, go around, and then back over to here without going past the middle line. Okay. So again, I've got poly strips, hold down Control. Let's try a full face loop that kind of goes around like this. Let's see how that comes out. I'm going to sort of stop a little shy. That's not a bad start. So again, I probably have way too many polygons to start with, so I'm going to hit the minus a few times. You can see as I'm doing that, it's really starting to tweak some of my geometry, but I would rather do that and fix afterwards than have to deal with so many different faces. So let's try that out. Again, I'm going to hit A. All right, so let's try again, switching back to tweak. Do a similar kind of thing to what I did before. Now you can also, use F to decrease the range of this or size of this brush so that I affect fewer polygons, or fewer verts rather. You can see in this case I'm going to pull these verts right to the center. The other mirror is probably set up with clipping or whatever it is, so it doesn't go past that center line. So let's see here. Again, I'm going to be starting to tweak these verts so that they are these little edges, or this edge ring is pointing more inwards rather than at various kind of random angles. Okay. Again, I'm going to kind of tuck this down. Now it could be also that I don't have enough geometry right at this kind of corner of the mouth over here, and that's where I may jump over to a different tool. So for instance, right in here, let's say I want to add in a new loop. There is a separate tool for that called loops, and again, this is the kind of thing that there would be a hotkey for my in this to just quickly add in loops. Here I have to add in by switching to the tool, then again I can hold down Control to add in a loop. We go back to tweak again, and this is the other thing that's hopefully will have improvement with RetopoFlow. It's not responsive, I find, to just change between the tools. Again, I would expect and imagine that this kind of thing is going to be improving. And sometimes I'll even click to change my tool and it won't seem to take, so to speak. I have to sort of wait. Okay, I'm trying to get the right angle. There we go. Again, you can see I'm just pushing and pulling using this tweak tool to kind of get the shape a little bit better. I'm going to just leave that alone. I may end up doing some further refinement to that, but we'll just try that out. Okay, so there's my initial loop for my mouth. Now I'm going to switch back again to polystrips and establish that key nose to chin loop. So that typically goes, say, over here, kind of cuts right through across there, down and around the outside of the mouth, and then kind of goes across the chin, okay, to the center again. So let's try that out. I'm going to hold down Control again with the polystrips, drag it, it's a little bit of a short or kind of tight path over there, go around, and I'll try going right around to there, and not bad. You can see there are again some sort of things that happen over on the center line there. Going to be really easy to tweak that after the fact. I think I might just leave that alone. Now, something to bear in mind too, as soon as you can, as you sort of start doing more and more retopology, you start to think or anticipate how you're going to connect these different loops. And what I mean by that is you want to already start thinking about connecting, say, the verts or edges here to here. Now you'll notice they're not quite lining up, but what I would do at this point is really start to think, am I getting roughly the same number of verts along here that I have along here, and same thing over here, because again, I'm going to be wanting to attach those, and the closer I am to the same number, or even ideally the same number, it's just going to make the filling into those spaces so much easier. So that's actually not far off. I may need to add or take away some loops, or certainly move them around to kind of match them up, but that seems pretty good. So I'm going to hit A, and again, switch over to, say, tweak, and do some adjustments like getting that thing closer to there. I think I don't like that whole location right there, so I'm going to kind of bring that further down. Maybe I'll increase this whole tweak size so I can tweak a larger number, because I wanted to bring that meeting point a little further down the bridge of the nose, something like that. Okay. Same thing over here. Gonna sort of bring all that down a bit. All right, again, I can worry about, now another thing to think about as you're doing retopology, there is another tool I haven't shown yet called Relax. Now I'm not going to use it right now, but Relax allows you to kind of smooth out problem geometry. Like when you start to get zigzaggy flow, jagged flow, when you start to have sort of spacing or distribution issues of your edge loops, this is a great tool for kind of quickly fixing that. In other words, it allows you to not be so perfect with your initial geometry. It allows you to kind of clean up a lot of stuff very quickly after the fact. Once again, this is another tool that I'm used to quickly in QuadDraw Maya and QuadDraw, just holding down the Shift key to use this tool without having to manually switch over to Relax. I find that there's a lot of different programs that kind of have this commonality, namely if you're in ZBrush and you want to switch temporarily over to the smooth brush, you hold down Shift. Same thing in 3D Coat. It allows you to jump over to the smooth brush temporarily. So I'm sort of using Relax here with smoothing in other programs, but it's kind of the same idea, which is, again, it would be great to have that standardized in RetopoFlow, that holding down Shift allows me to temporarily switch over to Relax. Okay. So I'm establishing, or have established, those key face loops. I could continue, I talked about the raccoon mask, so actually let me just try and fit a raccoon mask in there. This is, again, a really tight squeeze, and you can see I tried switching to the tweak tool. It didn't allow me the first try. Now I can, and so now you can see I'm actually right now starting to line up verts to other verts. You can see I'm sort of pushing and pulling these verts so that they start to line up with the ones elsewhere. Sorry, the ones up, again, this face loop to the one around the eye. I'm also at the same time creating a little extra space in there so I can at least get one raccoon mask strip all the way around here. You'll see what I'm talking about in a moment. Okay, I kind of could use an extra face loop, eye face loop outside here. This seems like a good opportunity for me to switch over and show you off the poly pen tool, which I really like. Now this is something you'll see, it's pretty common with a lot of retopology tools. This is for sort of a face-by-face tool, but it's really nicely implemented in RetopoFlow. With this, I typically start with right-clicking to select an existing edge, like this one. And this is something, again, kind of being a little picky here. It seems to borrow from old school Blender, now old school Blender, which is everything is based off of right click select, but actually Blender by default has now moved to left click clicks by default. So again, you have to kind of do that mental jump between right click to select, left click to right click select. I would just prefer that it just become like standardized Blender where it's just left click select. Okay, so I'm used to this for now, but I would love it if it switched. So I've right-click selected this, again with the poly pen now again, Control to activate this, and you'll see we get a little preview of a new triangle. Now I can either create triangles or quads with this. I'm gonna actually create mostly quads. So if I left-click once, I get 1 point or vert, twice, and I get a brand new polygon over there. Now, what's important, you'll notice there are two different edges that are highlighted. That's pretty important to note what edges you kind of have available to you. This allows me to kind of create new polygons off of either one. So I can actually go over here. So for instance, I can Control click, click, and you can see this just allows me to start going all the way around one by one, and you can see I'm just going outwards to create another face loop. Again, this is typical of eye topology. Whoops. Now I'm going to try and get pretty narrow in there so I give myself space for the raccoon mask. But again, you can see what I'm doing here just to save myself time is I'm making sure to keep these loops sort of straight. Now I mentioned that there is that tweak tool, which is good for, it's tweaking and doing a lot of tweaking, but the poly pen does have a little tweak kind of built into it. You don't have to, in other words, switch to tweak if you don't want to. If I hit A, I'm just going to, remember that swaps between select all and deselect all. That's great. Now what I can do is I can say right click to select something like this vert, and then just left click allows me to tweak these things. So you can see I can use that to sort of start to straighten these out a little bit. So for instance, over here, this is not straight. You'll notice now these are sort of straightened out. So now that I've got that, ooh, looks like that is not connected. Now it should be. Great. Now I'm going to continuing right down here. Down to there. Now this is one last little cool feature, which again I haven't seen elsewhere, but maybe it exists. Instead of doing 1 and then 2, you'll notice if I just go from one existing edge, control, and then go across, this actually does a bridge, which is wonderful. A little time saver that I find is just a great design decision. Well done, RetopoFlow. Okay. Again, I may end up probably be fine with the number of edge loops over here. Okay, raccoon mask, and now I can really start to fill in this space. So I'm going to start using that great little feature, and you can see how quick it is just to fill those things in over there. I'm probably going to need to start thinking about a pole somewhere over here. Now, actually, I'm going to go ahead and dissolve this edge. And by the way, this is something I can do in a lot of different tools, where instead of selecting a vert, I can select an edge, and I'm just using right click again for select, or I can select a face. But in this case I'm going to select an edge, and then I can use Blender's sort of internal hotkey, which is if I hit X, it brings up the ability to delete or dissolve geometry. So I'm going to go ahead and dissolve edges. Now let's see, if I delete edges, you see where it gets rid of the edge, but it doesn't get rid of the verts. If I go here to dissolve edges, I would expect that I would get rid of the edge and the verts, but you can see it still keeps the verts. So again, I would imagine that that's something that's going to be updated. So I need to do a second time where I go to dissolve vertices, and now you can see that gets rid of everything. I'm just going to distribute this a little bit further. There we go. So raccoon mask, so I'm going to go back up here. I'm still in my poly pen. And let's try doing something like this. So I've got a pole that's being developed right over there. We'll see how that works. I may end up not liking the location of that pole. So I'm continuing all the way around here. Again, retopology in real time, probably not the funnest thing in the world to watch. So let's see here. I'm going to maybe go right. Actually, I feel like creating my next pole right here. So now what I'm going to do is start veering off. So again, rather than creating a new face down there, I'm going to start going up in this direction. And this little loop is going to kind of go up towards the center. There we go. And meet at the center. Once again, it's going to probably be a nice idea, which I didn't do, to match up the number of faces. In fact, or edges. I haven't decided yet whether I want to reduce over here or increase over here to match all the numbers over there. So I'm going to just sort of continue straight through to here. Get right to the center. Great. And then I can fill in this whole space, and this is actually a great time for me to show you another tool. Patches, which is great. Now, in order for patches to work, I want to kind of automatically fill in this whole space. And I could do it one by one, but patches can be a nice time saver for filling in those large gaps. But in order for it to work, I do need to get a correct match, like I was mentioning, where I get the sort of same number in particular of edges here as down here. Now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 there, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 there. I think what I'm going to do for now is get rid of one of my edge loops over here. I can always add another one in later on. So I'm going to use a similar process. Right click, shift to select that whole thing. I think I can also control, nope, let's see, shift. Is it alt right click, shift right click? No, I don't know where it is. Okay, so do that. Again, X, dissolve edges, and again, X, dissolve vertices. Great. So now I got the same number. Let's try out patches so you'll see how this works. Switch over to the patches tool. I'm going to just deselect everything, A. So the way this works is if I hold on Control Shift and right click on, say, one of these edges, notice how it's selected that entire edge loop. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Control Shift, click right in there, and you're going to see it's starting to give me a preview of all the geometry in there. It's looking tweaked because I need to also do the same thing for that loop up here. And if I had the wrong number, or should I say a different number here as compared to here, I would basically get an error message saying cannot create this patch. But I would believe I have the same number now, so if I Control Shift click up here, you can see it's previewing and it's going to fill in that entire thing. The hotkey to make this is F, and you can see that's it. So then I can say go back over to here. See how it didn't select the poly pen my first try, so I'll try it again. There we go. And now you can see I can push and pull these things and sort of tidy them up a little bit. I could have also used, say, relax. So that is pretty much my raccoon mask setup over there. So that, generally speaking, is the ticket. You know, establishing those full face loops. Hopefully this was useful to people. Yeah, feel free to leave comments. I would love to know any tricks that I haven't thought about or don't know about with RetopoFlow. Maybe I haven't used it enough to know, like, oh, you could totally do such and such and tweaking would be easier. There are these hotkeys that I don't know about. I haven't, to be honest, read all the documentation. So again, please let me know what I'm doing wrong. Thanks.